Yes, noted.
Troy and McReynolds and Andy are excused.
Okay.
I do believe there are.
Andy, this one is in Iowa. McReynolds is.
Is absent or excused?
McReynolds is excused and Ewell is excused.
Yeah.
They're both required to give notification. They did so.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Yes, sir.
I believe we have no comments and correspondence tonight. So, no public appearances. So I'm looking for a reading and approval of the minutes of our last meeting from 10/14 of 24.
So move.
I have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any questions, comments, concerns about those minutes? All right, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I am looking for a motion to move item number 2 up to the number 1 spot. And switch that around if that's possible.
Okay by me? Yes.
Alright, so that was the first,
Yes.
second Linda? Alright. Any questions about that? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Alright, moving, item number 2 up. Zeke, can you start that out, please?
Yes, sir. So handed up in the preceding this meeting was an opinion of probable cost from our engineering firm Baxter and Woodman to redo Jefferson Street. If you recall, we sent out a stakeholder survey to all the registered voters in the village, and that is the one item that came back as a possibility for interest in a referendum to raise taxes in order to handle a capital project. So total project cost on this is coming in at an estimated $2.6 million. Does not include, well, it includes some of the utility work. Doesn't include full redo as we originally anticipated. Understand we've done some televising since the sewer utility, and that can be sleeved. And there's some light water work that needs to be done with some of the laterals. Brett.
Yeah, we did try to include all the utility upgrades as much as we know right now.
Okay. So overall project cost is estimated at $2.6 million, which is quite a bit less than what we had originally anticipated this being, largely because the utility work is not as robust as we thought that it would have to be. Design, construction, and engineering comes in at $110,000. Later on tonight, we're going to talk about the capital budget. There's a line item in there for that. So this item was discussed by the village board and DPW committee, and needed to come here. One, just so y'all know, hey, this is on the radar. The public is willing to consider a referendum for this. So I would look for your approval when we get to that budget section for the engineering, and we would not look to schedule this work until after 2027 as we complete the East 9th Street project. So engineering would begin sometime next year. We work through what we need to work through with the existing budget, and then we go from there.
Alright, yep.
Once we get engineering done, then we could go for grants, right? At least,
If there are any out there.
if there are any out there, at least we can try to get something.
Go it all.
But we need to do the engineering first and have it ready to go.
Yep, we will go after every grant possible, and this is definitely a project that I think we hear about often.
I just wanna make the point.
So what we would,
Yep.
what we would look for
Correct
from the
process.
committee is a motion to recommend approval of the project at this point. It doesn't mean we're gonna pull the trigger on completion, but hey, we know this is on the radar, we know we wanna get it done. So let's move it off of your table and on to DPW and village board. And as we get further along in that process, we'll bring things back to you.
Okay,
Motion second.
any questions for Zeke or anybody regarding any of that?
Typically, when you ask for the grants, how much are you anticipating
Not much.
to achieve? None?
For East Main, Rick was able to get us 400,000. That is the exception rather than the rule. Usually we're talking in the teens, thousands, like 10, 20,000. So transportation surface aids are really geared up to federal highways, not for local roadways. That's what you got here. There are 2 pots of money out.
There's several different ways. Usually the maximum you can get is 80%, but that's kind of rare. So
Are you-
yeah, like you said, Main Street
are you going to incorporate pedestrian amenities? Are you going to incorporate bike paths? Are there significant conflicts with traffic flows that are noted? So like, have you had fatal crashes on the roadway? So this roadway is just probably not gonna score super high. We'll still submit. I just don't expect that we're gonna get a,
Bicycle
50%.
facilities really
Yeah.
help out, which help that east wing also.
yeah.
Okay. If there are no more questions at this moment, then I'm looking for a motion to pass that on to the other entities that need to see that. Proceed with engineering and for next year, yes.
So move.
First and a second, any more questions? All right, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thanks, Brett.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. It'll go to the board from here and 2025 kickoff for the work.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you everyone.
thanks.
Thank you. All right, we're moving on to a presentation and discussion of the draft 2025 budget for library, fire, special funds, TID 3, and the general fund. And consider appropriate motion for action.
Yes, sir. So I'll start the presentation with just a snapshot on page 3 of your packet. There was some, should look like that. So,
Look, one with the center.
oh, yeah, the digital packet that was sent to me.
Okay.
So page 3 really is just a snapshot of a consideration on, hey, where does the money go? You know, as we talk about, you know, increasing funding for one department, it ultimately has to come at the expense of some other department. And not that these percentages mean anything in and of themselves, right? There's input, there's output, and there's outcome. It's really hard to price the outcomes that you get from the library, largely because the best outcomes are gonna be singularly high priced. And you manage that operation in aggregate. So when Heather shared stories about really great outcomes from folks that were handled one-on-one, you know, what's the cost of that on a one-on-one basis? The answer is we don't track cost that way, right? So we don't know what that is. So the best we can really give you is, hey, here's the output value for this, meaning how much are we spending per department. Your library makes up 5.18% of your overall general fund spending. Legislative, which is your village board's 2.65, you can go down the list there and look at them. I'll note that EMS is 21.53, police is 10.89, and fire is 4.65. That's not atypical of most communities in America to have really high public safety spending. You know, so if we look at outcomes, I would tell you that your public works are doing the worst of all of your departments. They were underfunded for years. In recent years, there's been quite a bit more funding, so there's been a good bit of catch-up that's taken place. If you were looking at it from a management standpoint, you said, hey Z, which department needs a lot more resources? 100% the answer is your public works department. Doesn't make it right, doesn't make it wrong. So that'll lead into conversation from last meeting around page 4, which is the allocation of general property tax funds over to the library. So based on the last conversation, we inserted $25,000 placeholder because that's where the conversation landed. And so you might ask, well, where's that money gonna come from? And the answer is like, you don't have that money. There's not a magic pot that we can go to other than your cash accounts. To use an analogy of like the goose that laid the golden egg, if we looked at other budget sections, you would see significant interest income. When you spend down the principal on your investments year after year after year, you don't have interest income from that principal in order to sustain the system that you have. So right now that interest income is challenged with the changing macro interest rate environment and trading of treasury bills and notes. So we can only garner what's out there from a market interest rate standpoint. We do have that hedged against bank term deposits, but you know that market is just changing. So if you were to say, hey Zeke, is there anywhere we could go in order to get some funding for the library? I would direct you to your sewer utility, largely because you also control the income side of that equation. In other words, it's not one of your existing general fund supported departments. You should raise your utility rates and then transfer those funds over to the library. That would create a balanced budget. Okay. So I think that's your first conversation. like to change your appropriation to the library.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. I don't think, I'm guessing, we can all talk about it up here, but I'm guessing we don't want to raise rates of the sewer fund at the moment. That might be something we can talk about, but I don't think so. As everybody remembers, last week, I had a very passionate plea of an increase of $25,000. And passion is a beautiful thing, but realism also is very important. And after a week of looking at numbers and trying to come up with $25,000 where there is not $25,000, we need to have a conversation at the board level here, and we have three of us here, on the committee level, sorry, and decide if that $25,000 is something we want to, like Steve just said, pull from our cash reserves, which is not something that should be done, to typically long-term fund any entity. We go back to the allocated amount that was in there before last week at 200,016.5. We did discuss last week, and Heather's aware and the library board is aware of the roughly $36,000 after the audit.
Yeah, can I go on that one? There was
Sure.
some comments made at the last meeting that I just want to talk to those that are from the library on. So we use fund accounting in the village of Waterford. What that really means is that we have a bunch of pots of money. And if you look inside the document and kind of look at it, top and bottom, we start every year with cash on hand at the top, and then that's verified by our auditor. We then incorporate the revenues for total funds available. So this is cash on hand plus all revenues equals total funds available. And then we go through the spending that took place for the year. So we take total funds available minus the spending, and that gives you a fund balance. Every single year under state statute, that fund balance gets dumped back over to the next beginning year. So there is no sequestration of funds that occurs via the treasurer or me, the village board, the finance committee. Anything you don't spend in any year just goes over to the next year. And you get to continue to roll those funds. It seemed as if, you know, there was some thought on like, well, we had $36,000 left over, and why, you know, like, where's that gonna go, or how does it get treated? So it's yours, doesn't go anywhere, it just rolls from year to the next. There have been years that you've had a pretty significant excess, so the fund balance in some previous years has been as high as 6 figures. That's not necessarily best management practice, to have those excess funds just sitting around, and that was before you. This is a different conversation. So that money's still there.
Okay.
Okay.
So now that we discussed that, that's been spoken 2 meetings in a row, that money's there and everybody's heard that. We just wanna make sure everybody is aware that that's there. If we don't come up with a number above that, you will have that to start next year, assuming that your budget is balanced this year, as you've shared with me on a monthly basis. I think you're trending that way. So that roughly what was it, Heather, $45,000 hit next year from the county?
41,000.
41,000, that's going to help that 36,000. But I would like to discuss with Linda and Todd what they feel about the 25,000, a different number, keeping it what it was last year, and letting the library have that $36,000 that is theirs to go into next year. Let's just have a conversation on where we're at with that.
So being that I'm new on the committee, that $36,000 that's been kind of sitting out there, where did that come from? I guess I need to understand where it came from
I can
and,
explain it. This,
and why.
the library is the only department that are their own entity. The money that they don't spend out of their budget, whether it comes from the county or whatever, stays with them.
So think about like a balance sheet.
Yep.
Yeah. So revenues come in, if you look, that's 404 and 840. Okay. So for total revenue for year end or year estimated 2024.
That's estimated, that's not
Yeah.
actual.
That's probably pretty darn close to actual. Yeah. So, you know, this is a transfer to the county, this came from us, those are two different sources, right? So there might be some variability in copper, but that's what they've actually brought in as of where we are now. And then for expenses, these are like projected out, so if you look at where they're at, it's like, okay, well, there's only all of that, and that led to us like finger down a remainder of 36.70. Okay, so they said, hey, we plan to spend, you have to get another sheet of budget document, we plan to spend more, but we didn't, we did a good job, right, we controlled expenses, and now that money is showing us start of 2024 after we get all it, right, and that runs down, and whatever they have at the end of the year, it might be 36, it might be 42, it might be 28, right, depends on what expenses happen over there between now and the end of the year. That'll be the starting balance, so we'll get the audit back in April, we'll have a true up around the audit, to balance that out, and that'll be, kind of how we'll operate their accounts.
So that's when those funds could technically be used
Yeah,
then?
so, they're active now.
Yes, they're in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're there now, so if you look at funding, right, let's just say, okay, well, hey, they had a balance of 36K. By increasing 25K and incorporating all their planned spending, right, you're talking about an increase in fund balance, right, so it's not like fund balance stayed flat, the plan, right, is increase the fund balance, right?
That helps.
They're pushing their savings account, like, unlike any other department like DPW, if they don't spend all the money on the salt, that comes back and stays in the village. The library doesn't work that way.
Do you guys mind talking a little bit louder? It's really
Sure.
hard.
Oh,
hear.
he was just explaining, helping me, cause I'm new on the committee.
Yeah.
Understanding the number where that 36 was, so.
Well, I don't think we all necessarily know either, so.
Okay.
You guys didn't spend money somewhere, right, I don't know what that was, we could go through the fines we comb, but.
I could kinda explain it overview as, like I was telling her, is the library's the only department. You guys have your own board, you set your own budgets, everything. You get funded from the village, X amount of dollars, you get funding from the county, X amount of dollars, and all that goes into a pot, and that's how much money you got to spend. And if you do not spend all that, then you guys don't give it back, you keep it, that's your fund balance. And if you did not spend your last year's budget, then it turns over to next year, that's where the $36,000 comes in.
Part of it looks like you had miscellaneous income, I think these are probably donations on a one-time shot of 22,435, that explains that much of that to me. And then it looks like you had a couple $1,000s in reduced administrative charges, we laid people off, right, so you guys didn't get a charge back for that, so that probably saved you $4,000 of it. And then your health insurance costs were markedly lower than they were the preceding year, but just looking at what I have in front of me, I can't give you what that dial-in is, those are just the three that jump off the page at me as hey, these are things that would have resulted in either an increased revenue that was unanticipated originally or a decreased spending that, maybe just didn't get mapped out for the budget.
Money that didn't get spent
Yeah.
beyond the budget, and you get to keep it. It's not like if Rick doesn't spend, all of his salt budget, then that comes back to the village, and actually that goes in our capital account for trucks and for that kind of stuff.
So I'm gonna bring up some things that have happened in the past, and it was before anybody that's sitting out here in the audience were in these roles, or three of you were in the finance committee chair, so this is, memory that Zeke, Don, and Tammy would have. In the past, due to either increased unanticipated revenues or smart spending, I'll just call it smart spending by previous library boards, at one point, come on in, Rosie, the library board had amassed a roughly $100,000 fund balance, a little over that. And spending decisions were made to hire 2 additional full-time employees that weren't necessarily consistent with fiscal sustainability. So it worked in the short term because they had that big cash cushion to be able to spend down for those positions. And then when we had dialogue about those, it was kind of like, well, we don't understand why these positions can't continue. It's like, because you don't have the operating income to sustain those positions, you were spending it out of one-time cash.
Basically, spending out of your savings.
Right.
Tammy?
If I remember correctly, at one of the library board meetings, we had a discussion about charges for work comp or something. Did you ever get that cleared up? Were we being charged for a workers' comp and you weren't aware of any work comp claims?
You have insurance that you have to pay for. Maybe the only thing I can think of. Yeah, you have a percentage of the premium you gotta pay for.
Okay, I got it.
think one time, was it the discussion of the, adoption of the personnel handbook? And we talked about perhaps looking into short-term disability insurance?
Yeah, that
Is
might have been a part
Is that
of
what
it.
you were thinking of, maybe?
No, I thought there was an error, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Oh, are you looking at the, I think at one of the
What?
meetings, I had presented a draft copy of the budget, and I had just jotted down, I didn't have the workman's comp number, but usually
Okay.
it's like 214, yeah.
Okay.
It's
It's like
pretty-
240
Very
bucks.
low
Alright.
for work comp,
Yeah.
their exposure.
Okay, I was just gonna say, go ahead, you.
No,
I was just gonna say, are we all kind of on the understanding of the roughly 36,000? However, we got, or the library got to that point, there's roughly that amount sitting there at
and that's,
this moment.
and that's theirs to spend, the village isn't taking that back from.
You get one
Okay.
spending decision, and that is how much you're going to fund them, that's it.
Yeah.
Okay, I just-
Everything
No, I'm
else
just
happens
looking to
on
make
that
sure
side.
the people from the library and library
That's-
board
I mean, I
understand it.
understand, yes, I
Yeah,
understand.
because-
yeah.
My next comment is gonna then, I wanna make sure they understand that. Because I was pretty vocal at the last meeting about, I think our library's underfunded. Given, I'm new here on this, but looking at, over time, cutting by 10% in the last 3 years is, I can't believe it. I come from a mindset of growth. And I moved to Waterford some 3 years ago, understanding what the community is, but hoping for better for the community in the future. And that costs money. There is nothing that can happen in the village to improve us and continue growth without us spending some money. And I've been on this finance committee now for about 6 months, and all I've heard is, no, we're not going to spend money. I don't get it. I don't. I'm sorry, I hope not, I'm trying not to be disrespectful, because I understand your stated goal as the village board president is to have 0% tax increase. Well, that's not realistic in 2024 if we want our village to grow. And I'm not talking growth like this, even this small incremental amount. So I think in the very, very short term, it's nearsighted to think, because you have been fiscally responsible and are gonna carry over $36,000 for next year, that we shouldn't give you a budget that lets you grow a little bit. Now, I understand that in today's world where we're sitting, to give you the $25,000 means the pie doesn't get bigger, the pie is the pie, and we're gonna have to take from somewhere else, and that somewhere else taking could be from the whole community by raising property tax. Again, I would hate to have Zeke have to do a whole bunch more work, but what would that increase be?
Can I?
Yep, you jump in, yep.